Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, mate. Where you're joining us from, myself and Paul Kelly. We are back, and that means one thing and one thing only. We are in our element here. We're in preview mode, and we're previewing a super fight here. This is super bantamweight, to be precise. Lewis Nery versus Inoue. Obviously, man needs no real introduction. This is said to be a cracking fight taking place at the Tokyo Dome, where Naoya Inoue does like to fight. So yeah, obviously there's some criticisms have come about whether he will travel or not, but then make of that what you will. 26-0, obviously Inoue against 35-1 Lewis Nery. Now, Paul, we don't like to spend too long talking about tails of the tape anymore. Both guys, or most of our fans, most of our viewers will know who these guys are. So really, it's a question of getting stuck right in with a couple of challenging questions. And I'm going to hit you with one straight off the bat here, Paul, and it's going to be about Naoya Inoue. And the question is this, Paul: at this stage, do you consider Inoue to be unbeatable?
Oh, straight off the bat, big right hand landed on the jaws. Yeah, mate, it's a really tricky question to answer. What I would say is I don't think anybody is unbeatable. Boy, Inouye's close to it, isn't he? He really is. I go on record saying that at the time in the World Boxing Super Series was on, if it wasn't for injury, I do believe Ryan Burnett would have stopped Naoya Inoue. I will say that. Just as a caveat, no, Elliott Stotty will give me a lot of abuse for that now, and maybe even blank that part of the video. But yeah, in all seriousness, mate, I think since then, like you just have to look at Inouye's body of work recently, and you're like, how do you beat this guy? The only thing that can beat Inoue is maybe if he bites off more than he can chew weight wise. So obviously he's at super bantam. When he get into the feathers, the super feathers, could he win world titles there? He probably could, mate. I wouldn't write him off. But like anything more than featherweight, you're sitting going, you're going to be tiny compared to other people. But he's a concussive puncher. It's everything's perfect. You can't really make a criticism of him. To be quite honest. So I find it really difficult to say that he isn't unbeatable. Could he retire undefeated? Probably. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But like the only thing I do see beating him maybe would be the weight. But then again, if Inoue fights at super featherweight, 130 pounds, like that's up what? That's like nearly 2 stone more than what he started his career at, and which in the lighter weights is ridiculous. Could he win one there? It sounds ridiculous saying this, but are you going to say that he couldn't? Are you going to write him off? Probably not. So I think, to be honest with you, in a roundabout way of answering your question, I think he's close to unbeatable. Yes. What are your thoughts?
Um, yeah, I think to be honest with you, in the division that he's currently fighting in, the bantamweight division, yeah, I think no chance. I think he's unbeatable in that division, and I actually fully agree with you. I do think it's only going to be the weight that can possibly stop him, and weight and ambition. And I suppose equally, like we said before, like he's not fought outside of Japan. So like if he comes to the US, does he come to the US? Does he get a dodgy decision against a US fighter? Maybe something like that. But I don't think in that division. No, I think you're spot on there. I can't add anything to it. But we are going to come into I suppose, a bit more of a nuanced question, Paul. Now, because you mentioned some of the other weights, you mentioned obviously featherweight, super featherweight, and obviously a couple of your favourites obviously campaigned down at the featherweight division. I'm talking the likes of Nick Ball, Paul. I'm talking about the likes of, I suppose, Lee Wood, featherweight, super featherweight, all that sort of business. Where do you think? How far do you think Inoue could go? Let's talk. Do you think he could win a title, say at featherweight? Do you think he could beat any of those sort of champions? Obviously, you've got the likes of Espinoza, the likes of Lopez, Vargas, Raymond Ford. Do you think he could beat any of those guys? I mean, pushing up to super feather, you're even looking at monsters, like Navarrete, Valdez, Cordina, Foster, any of the Lamont Roach, those sort of names. How far does he go, Paul? Talk to me.
It sounds mad to think this, right? But see every
Right.
single one of those names you just mentioned there. I'm reluctant to say, obviously, as a Lee Wood and Nick Ball super fan, but I think he would beat every single name that you just mentioned up to super
Are you
featherweight.
thinking? Are you thinking points, or are you thinking he would actually concuss those guys? Or even someone like Navarrete, do you reckon he'd get in there and stop Navarrete, or some one of those guys even up at junior lightweight slash super featherweight?
So I don't know, honestly, you couldn't put it past him. Like he's a concussive puncher, pound for pound, arguably the biggest in the sport. And like, yeah, who's to say an extra 4 pounds at featherweight he wouldn't still be able to knock everybody out? Another 4 pounds on top of that at super feather. Yeah, maybe be more difficult to put a dent in people, but like he punches bigger than a super feather than a super bantamweight that he is. Then you're getting obviously when you get into like the lightweights of the 135, then I think you're talking, not so sure because they're a lot bigger there. Big punchers in that weight division as well, with the likes of, Tank Davis, for example. And then obviously there's a lot of other fighters around that lightweight division kind of, but I mean, I'm gonna say to answer your question, he's already won four world titles in four separate weight divisions. Noting that he actually did skip flyweight, I believe. Went from light flyweight to super flyweight to bantamweight to super bantamweight. Um, Definitely win one at featherweight. So there's another one. I'd say I win one at super featherweight as well. But I'll not go any further than that. I think when you get to lightweight, you are just size is just going to play a massive part. So I don't think he could win one at lightweight. But then again, do I say that with any confidence, mate? No, I do not say that with any confidence whatsoever. He's just an absolute freak. He is literally, as his nickname says, the monster.
Well, you know what, Paul, I'm not gonna try and argue against you. Though. I think it's very interesting views there, which I'd like people to comment on in the comments whether they agree with you or disagree with you. I do think, actually, to be honest, I do think, jokes aside, I do think he could win one up at featherweight, definitely. Super featherweight, if he gets matched right, I do think he'd also win a title up there as well. So I actually agree with you. Although I'm not going to allow my name to be put next to the headline of Inoue stops Navarrete. But we'll move on. Obviously, Paul. I'm not going to ask you as well what you think of possibly Inoue versus one of your other favourites, Tyler Denny. We will discuss that at a different time. But we are here to discuss, obviously, the prediction that's taking place between Inoue and Lewis Nery for, obviously, the super bantamweight division. Paul alluded to both records. Obviously, you alluded to Inoue being a frightening puncher, 23 knockouts in 26 fights. Lewis Nery, 37 KOs himself, one KO loss on his record against Brandon Figueroa back in 2021. How do you see this fight playing out, Paul? You've alluded that you think Inoue is unbeatable, but do you think he'll stop Nery, or do you think there's a chance he'll be on points here? How do you see it playing out, please?
It is a good fight, to be fair. It's worthy of an undisputed super bantamweight fight. But I think Inoue wins. And I think he continues his knockout streak. I think he'll make it 24 KOs and 27 victories after this weekend. I see Lewis Nery obviously got knocked out by Brandon Figueroa to the body, I believe, in round 6 or 7 it was. And obviously Nery's had his kind of scandal, so to speak, and which are well documented. And I just think his inactivity, you don't want to be inactive or given any advantage at all to Inoue. I think Inoue will stop him. Range, I don't know, probably mid rounds. I maybe go round 6, 7, 8, even up to 9, maybe second half of the fight probably is where I see Inoue winning this. But yeah, I'm going for another Inoue stoppage, mate. What about yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm totally on you, buddy. Paul, I'm on with you, mate. I actually think it's the thing with Nery. It's not just talent. It's not just power. It's talent as well. And it's the way he sets up his shots and actual boxing ability. I think he's going to probably stop Lewis Nery again. I can see it somewhere being second half of the fight. Nery's a good fighter, but I think I can't bet against Inoue stopping someone else. To be perfectly honest with you, but guys, that's all Paul and I have got time for. Sensational video there. Paul's really he's climbed. Then he's talking about Inoue going possibly up to super middleweight, maybe even to heavyweight. We don't know where it's going to end. But let us know in the comments whether you agree with Paul there or disagree, or even how we've chosen this fight as well and how we predict this fight. Paul, thank you very much for joining me. As always, we've got other stuff on the channel, big fight breakdowns, reviews and previews and upcoming events. But guys, as always, thank you very much for watching and thank you very much to Paul Kelly for joining me.